Hey there, everyone. Just wanted to say hello, ask the expert, FinTech growth hacking. My name is Reggie Tan. We're doing the session with FFCON21, and we're excited. We're going to go ahead and talk about FinTech, cryptocurrency, and the aspect of growth hacking and in marketing. So today we have, this is pretty much your session, more so than it is than mine, but I'm going to start off with a few slides talking about the session information, a bit about myself, as well as what growth hacking is, as well as AMA afterwards, ask me anything related to FinTech growth hacking. During the course of this, 5-minute spiel I'm about to do, feel free to go ahead and queue up your questions. You're invited to either send them via text, or you're allowed to go ahead and request a video, and I'll talk to you directly. So we're going to get things kicked off with the session information, hoping that everyone sees my screen properly. But with this session, Ask the Expert is essentially a talkback session where you're invited to go ahead and ask any questions related to growth hacking. Feel free to, again, to submit them while we're doing this kind of kickoff phase. And so we're going to go through. My name's Reggie. Like I said, I'm a senior growth hacker and marketing strategist. I do consulting for a lot of clients in the FinTech space as well as cryptocurrency. For what I've done, about 14 years worth of marketing and about 6 to 7 years, I believe, in FinTech specifically. Myself, I write a Substack for marketers and entrepreneurs on marketer.substack.com. A lot of my experience comes through with blockchain applications related to Bitcoin's utility, payment processing, lending, investments, and e-commerce. On the client side, I helped raise $10 million in funding with a blockchain-based logistics startup, as well as hit really high revenue targets for 2 separate cryptocurrency payment startups as well too, among other things that you can find on my website at akareggie.com. My background. I'm also a certified product owner with the Scrum Alliance. I'm also previously a men's lifestyle influencer. I'm a content creator. Writer for HuffPost, as well as my Substack, like I mentioned, where I talk about entrepreneurial marketing, automation, and gamification, neuromarketing, and data science as well. So we're going to pop on over to talk about growth hacking. The growth hacking, if we wanted to kind of talk about it specifically, growth hacking is the intersection point between marketing, technology, and data. So being able to merge this crazy world where, technology and content is completely saturating us and where data is more valuable than oil, marketing is the thing that ties it all together. And growth hacking, specifically, it's a set of creative strategies and tactics focused on growth, and the specific aspects that it affects and can improve is areas such as the customer lifecycle, as well as early stage startups that are searching and discovering product market fit. Product market fit, by definition, is the ability to find, well, like it sounds like, the marriage between the product you're building and the market you're trying to attach to. And usually product market fit is an indicator of how well your product is going to perform. The other aspect of growth hacking, which really needs to be said, is what it is and what it isn't. First off, growth hacking is not just marketing. I mean, obviously, from my background, I'm obviously a marketer by trade, but growth hacking specifically lends itself a little further towards data-driven decision making, as well as coming up with really creative tactics that are outside of the box that utilize to create really, really fast growth. What growth hacking is not actual hacking. So you can't actually, well, I mean, there's other ways we can hack. We talk about it in examples afterwards, but ultimately there's no real, concern that someone's going to hack you or anything like that. What it is, growth hacking is actually focused on hyper growth, very, very fast growth, decisions that are created based on data, ideas, creative ideas for that matter, that really focus on being able to scale very fast. Maybe not as sustainable as a general marketing campaign, for instance, right? But that's the name of the game, especially when you're talking about early stage startups. The targeted strategies and tactics that come along with growth hacking as well. It involves coming up with strategies executing strategies, running implementation of A/B testing and such to go ahead and look at the data to make sure that the direction is where we want to go, and being able to learn from those data points as well too. But yeah, like I said, lots of rigorous testing involved with it, and it's just to make sure that we're essentially not wasting budget, not wasting time, and being able to find really fast ways to create, if anything, low risk, high reward. And so just in terms of 3 examples, I'll kind of blaze through it really quickly. And feel free to Google this stuff as well too afterwards if you were looking for a little bit more information, or you can ask me as well too. PayPal in its early days, they had evoked growth hack tactics in order to get itself on board. What they did was PayPal's original head of marketing, Eric Jackson, him as well as the rest of the team created a script. The script essentially was a charity bot that would message users on eBay, and they would go ahead and reach out to them with this script automatically saying, hey, I'd like to go ahead and to bid on your auction, but I'd like to only pay with PayPal. This is back when eBay didn't have PayPal, of course, and PayPal was a very tiny company. As lots of these top auctions started to get invitations essentially to go with PayPal, eBay heard what was going on from their top users, and they went ahead and took PayPal on board, put their icon right next to Visa and MasterCard, and that's where they took off on top of a referral program that gave $10 for signing up, as well as $10 per referral, and that's how PayPal became the biggest payment processor in the universe. So we're talking about Blueleaf and Robinhood as well too. They both utilized waiting lists. So Blueleaf, which is a financial planning platform, utilized a referral program that was time limited, which basically allowed you to refer friends only within a 1 or 2 hour block, which made the wait list even harder to get into. Robinhood allowed you to add yourself to the waiting list, but in order to bump yourself up, you can essentially go ahead and refer your friends, family, and et cetera, and that's how they're able to kind of get themselves up and going as well too. Mint, interesting case back in the mid 2010s. Mint essentially did a combination of both content marketing as well as growth hacking by essentially launching the Mint Life blog. The Mint Life blog was really hyper-focused on being able to become the go-to resource for everything money. They created videos, they created articles, infographics, everything you can imagine on financial advice. And because no one was doing it at the time, that's essentially how Mint became such a massive financial platform as well too. So 3 quick examples related to it. But if you wanted to look at other growth hacking examples outside of FinTech, look up Dropbox and Hotmail and Airbnb, actually, if you want to look into a little bit more about those example tactics. So we're looking at the Ask an Expert section now. I'm going to turn things over to the crowd to go ahead and take a look at exactly what questions we have. And if everyone is a little bit shy, that's okay. Feel free to listen. I can ramble on for the rest of eternity. Or you can listen to my aviary right behind this green screen if you're wondering why there's a lot of birds that are singing. We inherited them during this pandemic. Myself, I'm actually located in Toronto, like I said before, and I've pretty much been stuck inside this room for the past year. We're in the longest lockdown in anywhere in North America. So yeah, that's the reason why my hair is so long, and that's the reason why I'm going crazy. So I'm going to take a look at some of the questions here. So we're going to take a look at a question from Madeline Zanis. What's the difference between marketing and growth hacking? So when it comes to marketing and growth hacking, the biggest differences is how you would probably look at the actual verticals of marketing. So for instance, like marketing is really dependent and heavily based on branding. Growth hacking is not so much related to branding. Growth marketing, not to confuse everybody, but growth marketing might relate to branding. But anything related to branding is important, obviously. But when it comes to growth hacking tactics, we're looking on data. We're looking at things related to data and looking at things related to creativity. But branding is a long-term investment, and for that reason, it doesn't really sit alongside with growth hacking that well. Another aspect of differences between marketing and growth hacking is that growth is considered rapid with growth hacking, like I said before. Marketing looks at growth more as a sustained platform. So the campaigns you run that are in marketing are more for the long term. So you're essentially building out a campaign that will build the brand over a period of time. There's lower risk involved with it as well too. But with growth hacking, when it comes to growth, we're talking fast growth. We're talking about speedboats. We're talking about Teslas on ludicrous mode. We're going really fast. And generally speaking, fast doesn't mean sustainable. And that's partially the big reason, or big difference, I should say, behind it. Like I said, risk level is also much different. With growth hacking, there's a higher risk. And that's the reason why the rigorous testing is involved with it. While marketing, there's a lower risk because, you can run campaigns. And generally speaking, well, ad budgets and marketing budgets, they add a layer of risk versus, say, organic growth. There is a shorter, smaller risk involved with general marketing. Lastly, growth hackers have this tendency to be able to do development. Development is, in any kind of web development, whether we're talking web development, coding, anything like that. Myself, I took computer science in school before going into marketing. So for myself, I can certainly code a newsletter, for instance, or code anything HTML or CSS for that matter, but there's no way I'm going to be able to ever code. I won't be able to build an app, but there are growth hackers that can. And part of development is to be able to come up with ideas and ways to go ahead and scale through automation and other aspects to it as well too. So that's probably the main differences. And as you can probably tell, I had a feeling that question was going to be asked, so I went ahead and had those notes ready. So that's one Q&A question that we had, but feel free to go ahead and add some more as I come along. In the meantime, you can also follow my Twitter account, as you can probably see right here, Ramon Live. I occasionally take my Substack articles and create them into Twitter threads. I use Hype Fury if anyone wants to consider some of the tools I use. Hype Fury is extremely good for being able to scale on Twitter. I use it for scheduling, but also there's a fantastic tool where you can essentially copy paste your blog post into it, and it breaks it into individual tweets. That allows me to go ahead and not only create Twitter threads very fast, but it also allows me to do other tools such as being able to automatically retweet it after 5 likes, the ability to post a post at the very end of it that literally says, yeah, if you want to go ahead and check out my Substack, check it out. So there's different aspects of that are super cool. Plus, you can also queue up your Twitter posts months in advance using Excel with that platform, which I think is very, 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 very cool. I do feel like, I don't generally think that being able to utilize automation is a really important factor. And that's partially because you lose a little bit of the personality. So while I would absolutely recommend automation in order to save your time and save your resources and focus specifically on something that you probably have more value coming from, I don't want anyone to lose their personal touch when it comes to branding and questions related to that. So that's one tool I use. If you're wondering how these slides are on my screen, I use Prezi, P-R-E-Z-I. Prezi is, it's way cooler than PowerPoint. I think PowerPoint is 1995. And Prezi not only allows you to have cool kind of graphics like cool transition points like this. Yeah, that's cool for sure. But Prezi Video allows you to embed it right into your video, whether you're recording it locally or you're actually doing, an actual live stream like this. So that's one tool that I'm certainly using. And another tool that I really wanted to utilize that I didn't get to today is Crisp. Crisp.ai essentially allows you to remove the background noise. In my case, birds. And so for that matter, I didn't get to use it partially because of the presentation software that we're using here doesn't really allow for it. But more importantly, first off, it's really cheap. Like I bought a 1-year thing for, I don't remember how cheap it was, but 1 year worth of being able to delete the background from your noise. So if you have children, or if you have, pets, or if you have construction, like we have every single minute of the day in our building, it's fantastic for blocking that stuff out. And actually, if you're really, really into, considering with all the pandemic going on, everyone's stuck indoors, there's a high probability that you can also work outside too. So if you have a balcony, but unfortunately there's a busy street next to you, Crisp AI actually also deletes the background. Anyway, those are some tools that I currently use for it. But we'll take a pop back here to the questions. So taking a look at, so Sophia you asked for the tools that I use. I'll mention some more tools as well too as I'm coming along with this. I mean, for what I mentioned earlier, Hype Fury, Prezi, I use Crisp.ai for that. Yeah, so no problem. I can go ahead and if anything, I can share that on my Twitter later on, what tools I use for this platform, as well as for any other tools I've utilized as well too. I also, as you can tell, I have this really ridiculous setup with a podcast microphone and a ring light in front of me and a green screen that apparently is not green. Well, sorry, everything but green. So essentially, there's different type of platforms related to social media. I'll share some more on Twitter and as they come to me as well. But we'll move on to the next question here. And as they come to me, I'll definitely go ahead and offer that. How to start growth hacking from scratch. What decisions are to be taken regarding HR costs and targets? That comes from Nora. So let's break this down a little bit because there's certainly a few different things related to growth hacking. To start growth hacking, I would recommend looking into Sean Ellis. Sean Ellis is the guy who originally created the name growth hacking. Fantastic dude, knows lots and lots about obviously marketing, but in terms of scalability, he's the king. So if you take a look at growthhackers.com, there's an aggregation of articles from across the web that talk about growth hacking. They're mostly articles written by marketers. I've got on there with a few publications myself as well. And it's a perfect resource to be able to get started with it. But I would recommend if, more than anything, growth hacking comes from skin in the game. Like ultimately, I find that my skills of growth hacking came from working with different startups that were, ready to try risk. And one of the aspects of growth hacking that really works well is working with early stage startups that are still seeking product market fit. If you have a founder you're working with, or you're a founder yourself and you want to utilize growth hacking tactics, I highly recommend being able to be really open with your founder to get that trust with them and to be able to test different tactics. Myself, I do a lot of A/B testing on homepages. And again, another tool I used, Google Optimize, and whether that's Optimizely or Unbounce. I use Google Optimize mostly because it has better connectivity to Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics, although they all connect to it. I just find the native use is better. But creating Google experiments, Google Optimize experiments allows me to do some conversion optimizations. From a growth hacking standpoint, being able to start on the homepage and being able to make adjustments. And I would recommend, if you're going to make homepage adjustments, start by making adjustments to headline copy as well as call to action button copy. Those are the two primary areas that really create conversions. From there, you can go ahead and change colors to the buttons on the call to action. You can also go ahead and adjust the layouts of the page. And one optimization I did recently that helped well was copy simplification. So considering some startups are global, you have to remember sometimes the copy you start with, if you're in an English-speaking country, Canada, US, UK, there's a high probability that you're writing it for that audience. And part of the copy simplification is to be able to write it for countries that are not English speaking. And that surprisingly creates really good conversion optimizations as well. So that's another avenue that you can also explore. So so for starting growth hacking from scratch, invest in the tools yourself, growthhackers.com. Look into Sean Ellis. There's certainly a lot of books related to growth hacking. Sign up to my marketer Substack as well too, and I'm sure you're going to find a few things related to it there. But yeah, absolutely. Talk to people, connect with people. I also, and this is another tool that also helped if you're starting from scratch, is signing up for a mentor platform. I signed up for growthmentor.com. And that platform connected me with some fantastic mentors, and it's just under $100 a month, I believe, last I checked. But you're essentially able to connect with as many mentors as you can. You can read their bios, book their time. Some of them are free, some of them are paid per hour. But ultimately, you can connect with some people that know exactly what they're doing. And I can tell you, I was able to survive quite well during this pandemic with some advice from some of the mentors on there. So if you're looking to start from scratch, I highly recommend talking about them as well too. What decisions are to be taken regarding HR costs and targets? So that has to do with setting your OKRs, setting your I guess you would say your goals in advance. So being able to really quantify, this is the expected goal. If your thing is being able to convert homepage registrations. If your thing is to go ahead and improve email engagement, be very specific about how you're going to go ahead. First off, the quantity metric that you're looking for, but also to be able to identify what tools and costs are required with it. So I personally like to start small. I have this philosophy I learned from a friend of mine. It's a crawl, walk, run mentality. I don't like to run from the start. I think from a growth hacker standpoint, everyone has to crawl first. When you go ahead and you consider costs, keep them low if you can at the very beginning, because especially if you're testing, if you have time, definitely go ahead and spend the time to just test each channel, test each avenue properly, so that, if you're looking at, there's certain products and services that do well on Instagram, other ones don't do really well on LinkedIn. In order to find that, you kind of have to be on those platforms and test it out a little bit. And part of that is to be able to get the data. A lot of the native analytics that come with Twitter, with Facebook, and et cetera, they're good. If you have the ability to, maybe look into some other platform that might provide better analytics, such as Sprout Social, or if you're looking for something cheap, Zoho is really cheap and they have good analytics too. But being able to get some information and test it out, be very specific to say, we're going to run it for 3 months and, go from there. And if I were to recommend anything, I would most likely say, when it comes to FinTech, or when it comes to cryptocurrency and blockchain, Twitter, Telegram, LinkedIn, they're all fantastic platforms when we're talking about social communities, and Reddit, of course. But I would probably steer away from Facebook and Instagram when it comes to anything related to, trading. We're talking about stocks, we're talking about, cryptocurrency. Those communities don't generally do as well out there. So just to get ahead in terms of being able to figure out your initial steps, I would highly recommend focusing on LinkedIn for branding, as well as being able to really focus on the business case, and also to focus on Twitter in terms of, again, branding, but being able to build communities on there. Reddit and Telegram are very niche, unique kind of situations, where on Telegram you can create channels and groups. And especially in the cryptocurrency space, that's a big avenue that a lot of them utilize. But yeah, Telegram groups, Telegram channels, being able to bring communities together there works really well. And we're talking about Reddit as well too. So subreddits generally, as you all know, they host really loyal communities, and certainly that's a great place to go ahead and get feedback as well too about your product. If you're trying to discover if your product really works well or not, being able to utilize social listening platforms. Keyhole is one that I'm currently testing right now for social listening. But there's certainly lots of different ways to go ahead and discover that. So I hope that answers your question. Taking a look at the Q&A, I see a question from Madeline. How do you build your creativity to come up with growth hacking ideas? Staying away from the desk as much as possible. I don't think creativity comes from sitting in front of the computer. I think you need to get out. You need to get some air, fresh air. You need to walk, move your legs. You need to be able to, hang out with people that aren't in your niche, talk to them, hang out with them, just people that are outside of your space for that matter. I think that part of creativity comes from being able to get away from the desk. I would highly recommend also reading books. There's some fantastic books I can recommend. If I have time, I'll go ahead and share some. But certainly reading books allows me to go ahead and get out of my general shell to go ahead and think more creatively. And if I may throw something out there just to think super high level, just because we're talking about books and has nothing to do with marketing, Ikigai, which is it's a Japanese philosophy of essentially living forever. It allows me to go ahead and take a step back and see things from a completely different perspective. We as startup people especially really put work first over personal life. And part of that problem is that you kind of get stuck in the box and it gets monotonous. And if it doesn't, you're burning yourself out. So I would recommend being able to at least take a look at that book, maybe Google a few things related to it. But I would say that being able to get creative comes from there. Zahara says, I've read a lot about emerging crypto wallets and crypto asset management firms coming out, especially during the pandemic. How do these startups use growth hacking? Well, I can probably say that in the crypto space, there's about 95% of those wallets or trading platforms or anything, a lot of them are trash. And I'm going to say that straight up because unfortunately, I started in the crypto scene in 2017, back in the wild west of ICOs and such. And maybe it's because maybe I'm jaded by that whole, like early phase of crypto, but I just don't trust anything in crypto, at least functionally. A lot of people fluff, and that's one of those things that I just try to stay away from. But if we're talking about the real wallets, the real asset management firms that are related to cryptocurrency, what they utilize is a lot of different things. So in my days of working with ICOs, there was a strong sense of being able to create content that shows that, this is the platform, this is how we're building it out. Here's some roadmaps, here's some white papers, here's the team working behind it, here's the experience that comes from the team. Branding has a strong emphasis in terms of, as well as UI. And I do feel like, speaking of UI, that startups that are operating in wallets and asset management, a strong emphasis on branding is becoming stronger than ever. You go to Kraken.com, you go to Coinbase, and they are fantastically designed interfaces. Outside of crypto, I'm a huge fan of Wealthsimple's interface. Super simple. They might not be too advanced when it comes to features, but they can get there at some point. I think simplicity is the name of the game. If you're talking growth hacking, do whatever you can to make the customer's journey simple as possible. That includes being able to break down barriers that are part of the sales funnel and the customer life cycle, making that experience not only tie in together, regardless if they're receiving an email in their inbox or on your Twitter page, or they're on the onboarding page. All that look needs to be synergistic and for that matter, simple. So right now, the most popular and best performing wallets, asset management firms, are the ones that keep it personal and keep it simple. And at least we can kind of go in more detail there. If you have further questions about that, feel free to drop it. I'll definitely answer them. Brian asks, what is an underrated platform for advertising and growth? So advertising and growth, look, there's, again, if we're talking growth hacking, there's the white hat, and then there's the gray hat techniques. So I would probably, for this discussion, focus more on the white hat, and that's partially because I don't want to get nobody in trouble. And for that matter, when it comes to growth and advertising, the platforms that helped, I would say personally, I think for growth, and a lot of what I do relates to SEO and such. Ahrefs is fantastic. It may not be underrated, but I've tried, I tried the SEMrush, and I've tried all the other platforms. I just like Ahrefs, aggregation of keywords. I find that for SEO, that gives a better picture in terms of figuring out where to go. Although I will recommend SEMrush's audit tool. And it's always good that if you have the budget to get both, because really at the end of the day, no one knows what Google's doing from an SEO standpoint. So it's good to have as many touch points as you can to compare them. In terms of advertising, I've heard copy.ai is also very good for being able to create copy in your ads, as well as any other platforms that require copy. I think that when it comes to advertising, I always trust people, and that's partially what I've kind of, I guess, I leaned on, and it's partially because as a full stack marketer, I realized that myself, I could write copy, I can write emails, I can do SEO, I can run ads, but my bread and butter is strategy. My bread and butter is growth hacking. So for that matter, if I'm looking for an advertiser, I'll find an advertiser and do that stuff. So personally, I find people to be the best asset for platforms, if anything. Cool. So Brian also says as well, agree with connecting others for creativity. Where Good Ideas Come From by Stephen Johnson. It's a great book that talks about this concept. Awesome. I'll look into it as well. We have another minute or so, but we can keep flowing if we want to. I was told that I can go past 12:30 if I want to. If people are interested, stick around. If you want me to stick around, feel free to just say it in the chat and I'll keep talking, because apparently I haven't stopped talking for the past 30 minutes, and I don't think I'm going to be stopping anytime soon. So let's talk about books real quick. Okay, cool. Cynthia says, keep going. All right, I'll just keep going, I guess. I'd recommend, and you know what, if we're going to talk about, I like reading books. Oh, fantastic. Richard, you have a question. Okay, we'll take a look at that first, and then we'll talk books, okay? So Richard asks, if you are a B2B tech brand, what's your experience in getting to builders, i.e. developers in enterprise markets, to drive adoption of your tech platform? And also, I just noticed that Maggie has requested to join video, so I'll do that in 1 second. Just hold on. So in relation to B2B, my experience in getting to builders, so developers and enterprise markets to drive adoption to your, so in getting to builders, that's interesting because it's very difficult, especially when it comes to what I've heard, at least from the developers, my friends that run developer agencies, is that because the pandemic got everyone to work from home, it's harder than ever to get a developer. It's partially because, from what I heard, that developers working from home can essentially work with anyone, and for that matter, the turnover is actually getting higher than usual, especially for developers that are working in remote countries and such. So, from my experience, my recommendation, if you're looking towards reaching out to the builders, the engineers, the developers that have that experience you're looking for, I could probably recommend. First off, there's developer communities like Stack Exchange. There's obviously people that talk on certain forums and subreddits and such. You can run ads on Reddit subreddits, which I think is highly effective if you speak their language rather than speaking your typical language. I think that's a fantastic way to reach them at scale. Also, I think word of mouth, and if you ever want to read about word of mouth, I've written about it extensively. Word of mouth is also a fantastic way to reach out to other builders or other engineers or other developers in certain countries. My recommendation is, if you are looking for other people that really understand your brand, consider empowering them with equity. And that's partially because, if you want, especially lately with the past few years or so with the pandemic, the problem about that is that the pandemic has created a situation now where again, remote workers have an opportunity to work with anyone now. And it becomes a little bit harder for being able to retain them. I'd recommend giving them equity, especially if you're building a platform from scratch. If you're someone that has an idea, consider bringing on, first off, interviewing, because you want to make sure you choose right business partners that align with you. Talk with a few developers. If you align really, really well with them, consider bringing them on as a CTO. And that's also another opportunity to go ahead and build it as well. I hope that answers your question, Richard. If it doesn't, feel free to just leave it in the chat and I will clarify it. But yeah, absolutely. I'm going to bring on Maggie. Let's see what happens. I've never tried this moderation panel before, so let's take a look. I don't know if it worked. Maybe she left. Okay, well, that's okay. Yeah, the recording, Cynthia, she asked if we're going to get a recording of the session. Absolutely. I'm supposed to get a copy of it, but if it's not on the website, which I'm sure it will be, I'm certainly going to post it on my channels. Feel free to go ahead and add me on Twitter, Ramon Live, right here. And I'll post it on Twitter as well as my Substack and YouTube and whatever else is going on. Jennifer says, this is a fabulous session. Thank you. I would love a recording too. And that's definitely going to happen. Thanks again for the advice. Brian, great advice about the CTO. Absolutely. Thank you. We still have, looks like 23 people here. And so we can kind of stick around a little bit more. Lauren Linton, who actually was a person who found me and brought me on here to FFCon, says, this is amazing. Great insights. Thank you, Lauren. So we're going to move over to, I think we have Cynthia's joining the moderation panel. Let's take a look. Let's try this feature, okay? Let's see if it works. And it might not work, but there you go.
Little question. My main stakeholders, or even my clients, we will say, are governments. So in this case, governments of the Latin American region. If you will have this challenge, like you have to get deals with governments, how would you approach? That will be my question.
So as a developer, so let me get this straight, just to confirm I got this right. In Latin America, if you're looking to get a government role, is that the
no,
you're a developer? Or you
my startup has agreements with governments in order to go to the people to make the people become users. So we have an agreement with the Mexican government for 68 million users. But we need to replicate that with other governments in order to make our startup scalable, because it's a premium startup. So if you will have to get governments in agreement with governments, how would you approach that challenge? That will be my...
Okay, cool, no problem. So I'll just throw a word out there that I could say. hyper localization. And this works really well. I'll give an example. Up here in Canada, as an example, up here in Canada, we had a scenario where they wanted people to fill out the census, and the census is just filling out your information, where you live, who lives in the house, etc. And they realized when they send the census out that no one filled it out. So what they started to do was they started to get real specific. They were like, hey, if you live in Toronto, you should fill out the census. And then more people started to do it because they started to get localized. And then they started to say, you know what, you live in this neighborhood specifically, can you go ahead and do it? And then they even more so tried to go ahead and connect with it, start actually doing the census. Hyper-localization works really well because it's personalized. It really speaks to the individual target local groups, localized groups. And in this case, if we're talking about the individual governments, if I got that correctly, within the Mexican overarching government, ideas be able to work individually, personalized, and it takes a lot of work. Don't get it twisted. That's definitely a lot more work than usual. But I would really, really recommend being able to take the cycles, put the extra resources into being able to create that message for them individually. Now, the other thing is, especially since, and if I have it correctly, we're talking from from federal government to a municipal or like state or provincial government, being able to build better, stronger relationships with them. I know this is outside of growth hacking, but we're talking more on a, if anything, like just a partnership level, if anything. But strong partnerships last forever. And ultimately, some of these things related to growth hacking, yes, there's definitely news emails that you can blast out. There's certainly like creating channels, and there's some municipalities that have channels that they really utilize, while other municipalities don't. Being able to sort out which municipality works best by via email. Maybe there's a point of contact that works best for another one. Maybe they just they do better on phone calls. I'd like to say that there's different aspects that might work. But if I'm way off base, feel free to let me know and I can go ahead and get more clarity on it. So Jennifer asks, I'm starting a subreddit around financial education around trading and investing. What are the first steps you would take to gain trust in this community? Be a part of other subreddits. I would 100%. So here's the thing about anyone can build a subreddit. Anyone can start talking about anything they want on it. But the problem is that it's like every subreddit is its own ecosystem. I would recommend being able to make yourself very, 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 very visible on the bigger subreddits. So there's, for instance, I look at the subreddit Canadian Investor. I go there all the time. I'm there all the time. And I probably don't use Reddit. I don't post on it. I just lurk, if anything. But if I were to say I wanted to start a Toronto Investor subreddit, I'd make myself very visible on the Canadian Investor one, to the point where people started looking at where I'm posting. And if they see I'm also posting on that subreddit called Toronto Investor, then of course that's how people start finding me as well too. There's another aspect of, look, I don't like to just say run ads. I don't think it's always the answer to everything, but I do believe Reddit ads do work really well because it's more personalized. There's more freedom in the way you're speaking. And I think that there's lots of ways that we can go ahead and find that subreddit growth from it. And lastly, I drive all the other portals to that subreddit. So that includes being able to, if there's a website attached to it, drive your community there. If there's a social platform connected to it, drive that there. I have a belief system that every marketing campaign or every business has to have one primary landing page that they go to. And so if they have one primary, you could see it like, if I'm running a campaign, right now I'm running a campaign, for instance, with one of my trading platform clients, and we have a wait list. So the entire, everything from the PR to the social platforms, everything runs to one landing page because that's the central place that everyone gets their messaging from, and the call to action is closer to it too. I'd recommend, if you're running a subreddit, if you really want to grow it, make the subreddit the primary house, because that's the place where you're going to grow your community. And if you create a Twitter account for it, don't build the Twitter account community. Redirect everything to that subreddit. And also, lastly, post like crazy. You got to own it. Some of these, when it comes to, like, I had a recommendation from a friend that started an app, and they asked for my advice, and it was a community-based app. I recommended to them, they wanted to build this community. I told them, look, if you building a community is hard. It's one of the hardest things that you can do. And I would recommend you got to be championing that platform. You got to be the one that guides and leads the conversation. You got to be the one that goes ahead and brings other people on board. And even if incentivizing them helps, you got to make people active on that platform. And honestly, I would consider probably paying a few people to do it. Be part of that community for sure, just to get things kickstarted as well. Richard says, I found with governments in Asia, you need to get into their sandboxes. Most governments have strategic growth topics linked to the economy. So you need to tick one of these topics also. Absolutely. That's a really good point. There's definitely, in order to get in their sandbox, I think that they all have individual ways to build growth. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's because their target audience is completely different than yours, ours, or anybody's. So depending on where you're at, whoever your target audience is, you got to speak their language. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Cynthia says, thank you. We have been put effort in federal and left behind provincial or municipal. I'll try your approach. Fantastic. Okay, great. Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, there's, I think that covers the questions that are in the Q&A. And I think that covers the questions in the chat. You know, we got 17 people still here. Is everyone still alive there? Did I just talk everyone to sleep? Say something in the chat. Otherwise, I'm closing this thing. Still alive? Oh, hey, John. How you doing? Good to see you. In case you didn't notice, I watch a lot of IRL streams on YouTube. And I very, 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 very much enjoy this process of talking, you know, helping people, you know, talking to the webcam, reading the chat. I definitely think that that's something that's super interesting. You know, there's a few things I was going to talk because I was absolutely petrified doing this thing that no one would ask any questions. So I had a set of topics I would chit chat about just to get people, you know, get people's appetite going. But you know, there's you know, a few things that I wrote about that I thought were kind of cool. You know, do you guys want to hear about gamification? There's a lot of correlation between growth hacking and gamification. If you're not familiar with gamification is the level of building loyalty, building that stickiness with your product to the point where people that are just completely obsessed with it. And there's a lot of things, for instance, like gambling, video games, that sort of world utilizes to keep like growing that, but absolutely, gamification is one of those things. You know, with gamification, I always find that, you know, and as an example, I have a few examples of things I've written about where gamification really touches these 5 elements. Okay, gamification strategies come with the ability to earn things. So you can imagine earning points on a loyalty program. That's earning, and that's what gets people in on it. You know, like being able to collect points is huge. Being able to win things, and if I may use an example, I hosted for a retail store here in Toronto, it's a men's retail store. I ran a campaign with them called Naked Man. We ran a YouTube video. It reached about 7 million views. It got so big that we were able to go ahead and get it in movie theaters before. I think it was Skyfall, the movie, during the trailer run. But, you know, one of the fun things we ended up doing, and we extended that as much as we could, we squeezed that lemon as much as we could with that. The Naked Man campaign was essentially based on video shopping. So being able to shop via Skype or FaceTime from home in a retail store. And this was 10 years ago, so this is clearly ahead of its time. But in the aspect of gamification, winning things, we built an 8-bit reverse Donkey Kong Facebook game. And this allowed you to play as the character, the Naked Man. Feel free to Google it if you want. But the idea is that you're now trying to escape the hotel that, you know, he's in. And what we did was we distributed prizes for winning and playing the game and scoring as many points as you could. So you're earning things such as points, and you're winning things such as free socks, free ties, whatever it is that we were giving away. Now, the third aspect of gamification, escape from their reality. If you can get them to not think about life in its terrible existence in the pandemic right now, you would be killing it right now. And part of that is the idea of being able to adopt personalities, being able to go into different worlds. You could see that a lot of that is coming in right now with avatars. And with 3D worlds and such, a lot of that, it allows people to get, again, that element of gamification, being able to escape from their reality. You know, Trust me, reality should be good. And that's why I recommend reading that Ikigai book, because that is great for being able to love your life. But if we're talking about gamification, escaping the reality increases stickiness in your product. Fourth, socializing with other people. The social element, people need that. Again, related to the Ikigai philosophy, you got to make sure that you talk to people, you're part of communities. And if part of your product involves being able to communicate and talk with other people, that's a whole nother ballgame too. So if you're talking about a casino, for instance, there's a social element to casinos. There's a social element, especially with poker tables. And that's the element of being able to build gamification and socialization. Also, lastly, investing in it. So if people have invested their time and their money into something, the more apt to never really leave it. And that comes from the fact that when it comes to investment, if you invest your time into something, if you're playing Candy Crush like 6 hours a day, you are not going to stop playing Candy Crush. You know what I mean? And also, if you invest money into something, like for instance, full disclosure, I invested in Tesla stock about 2 months ago. I'm more invested in them now, although Elon Musk, a whole another story. As a company, I invested money into it. So for that reason, there's a bit of a gamification involved watching the stock price going up and down. Now, that has completely everything to do with trading platforms, has everything to do with being able to trade stocks and cryptocurrency. But those are the 5 elements of gamification that I find work extremely, extremely well. So John Colley says, missed the beginning, so might be a repeat. Suggestions on getting a unique product platform in front of finance folks, decision makers, that they won't be necessarily Googling for. So let me break this down here for a moment. Just be a repeat. Suggestions on getting a unique product or platform in front of finance folks, decision makers, that they won't be necessarily Googling for. Okay, I completely agree. I immediately my first instinct is always to Google things. If I don't know how to make a casserole, or if I don't even know what a casserole is, I'm going to go to Google and try to find out what that is. Okay. So, and part of that thing is the fact that we've kind of got to a society now where if we think first, we immediately just go ask Google. I got Google Home in the room right now, I think. Actually, I unplugged it. But anyway, Google is everything. But if you remove Google away from that equation, the way to get in front of people, and this might be the most simplistic advice in the world, so I apologize. Word of mouth. Word of mouth when you're talking about reaching finance folks, decision makers. Now, there's no platform. I mean, there is platforms, I guess, out there that you can connect to different decision makers. Obviously, LinkedIn is an easy one. And you can go ahead and utilize different LinkedIn platforms. There's automated tools as well as LinkedIn agencies that will do outreach for you. I haven't had a ton of success with those, unfortunately, but being able to get in the eyes of decision makers comes from word of mouth. If you're in with one, you can get in with others. I do feel like that there's, if we're talking about finance decision makers, it is a bit of a broad term. So of course, like you could be talking about, CTOs at different, at a lending company. You could be talking about, I don't know, like decision maker with a crypto company, for instance, right? So it depends on the exact demographic, the exact type of vertical that you're looking at. But I would say outside of, obviously word of mouth is the best way to do it, and showing your worth. Second of all, Zoom info. If you're looking to really just get that information for people, I used, I think it's hunter.io. To be able to find emails and phone numbers for specific people in specific companies. I've also used it to find, not that I used it, but hunter.io also offers you, as well as Zoom info, personal emails. And while I don't recommend jiving into their personal life or picking up the phone and calling their cell phone, that avenue was there, and that's okay too. So being able to go directly, that's more sales, of course, right? But if we're talking about really reaching those decision makers, that's it. Third, creating LinkedIn content. LinkedIn content is, and I'm not a big fan of this like clickbait LinkedIn newsfeed jive that's going on, where they're just literally blasting out anything related to self-serving messaging. But I will say, from a thought leadership standpoint, if you put your product out there, if you're doing really well with your content, people will find you. They will find you no matter what. If your product is out there, like one of my clients in the cryptocurrency field, we had an NHL team reach out with interest of accepting cryptocurrency as a payment. We didn't reach out to them. That was us doing a crap ton of SEO research, us putting out nonstop blog content, videos on YouTube, social posts with video and infographics, and being able to just put your content out there. Yes, there's a bit of Google involved, but there's a huge, if you build content for communities, there's people watching. And so I would highly recommend being able to just focus on, if you don't do the sales technique, if your word of mouth is you're already doing, then I'd highly recommend creating content specifically targeted to them. Choose the platforms that they're on. My assumption or hunch is that if they're a decision maker, LinkedIn is probably where they're at. There's possibly some journals or articles that from certain publications that they follow. Maybe you can run ads to them. Maybe you can find a back channel way to get a sponsored article on there too. But there's different avenues that they mostly look for, but I'd probably say those are the places to go. Steve Dryall says, this is great info. Thank you for sharing. No problem, man. John says, agree. We've been doing the heavy lifting one person at a time to build awareness, all about putting ourselves in front of them to be discovered and use that to build word of mouth. Absolutely. I think that's the right way to do it. There's a right way and a fast way, and that is the right way. The fast way would, and again, content creation is not a fast way by any means. But if we're talking fast, being able to go ahead and create, run ads to those platforms, being able to purchase ad spots, that can also help as well too. But finding a potential, and you know what? One last thing to touch that on, if we're talking about cash is king. Incentivize them as well too. There's always opportunities for referrals, even if it's one of those one-to-one conversations we have with existing clients. Offer them money to get them to bring their other people in, and that's another area as well too. Because my assumption, my hunch is that decision makers stick together, so their networks, you got to tap into them as well too. Awesome. So that covers those questions. Richard says, if I may, John, endorsement and evidence-based marketing is critical in finance sector. I completely agree. Evidence-based marketing, being able to, again, work with data, and working with data, again, there's a bit of bleed over with this conversation as well. Part of this conversation involves growth marketing. Some of it involves growth hacking. And if we're talking about data specifically, there's the really, really risky approaches that certainly can create more avenues of faster growth. B2B is one of those sectors that you can't really move as fast versus, say, B2C. B2C is, if you look at every example of growth hacking, the majority of them are always B2C. The PayPal one I mentioned earlier related to PayPal and eBay, it was B2B, but it involves creating a bot script that auto-messaged people on eBay, asking them to accept PayPal payments, as well as Airbnb's script that basically reached out to everyone on Craigslist, and told them basically to join Airbnb. Those tactics are all like, they have some leniency towards being the end goal of B2B, but they're still B2C heavily influenced for that. So sometimes growth hacking in B2B it takes longer. That's primarily the case. Cynthia says KPIs are important for them. Absolutely. If we're talking about like building awareness, numbers are all the game. I will highly recommend creating a case study for one of my past employers / clients. I had helped them from a B2B standpoint build a case study that involved really having a good relationship with one of the merchants and being able to work with them to create a narrative, a story that showed them from what their business is about, what their trials and tribulations were running their business, and being able to quantify that lastly with numbers to show them, the average order value, it went up, the average order size, and as well as the overall sales, the volume orders. Providing metrics always helps in B2B. It always accelerates conversations when you're dealing with B2B one-on-one conversations. And you know what, like, I would probably say if you can't show hard numbers because maybe your client or your merchant is a little bit hesitant about showing it, show percentage growth. and at least percentage growth, they could probably be okay with that, mostly because they're not, exposing any of their actual, sales data and sales revenue. They're more so at that point just talking about the percentage growth. So if it's a 10% growth from their annual sales, that's safe for them, and that provides you with some KPIs that you can sell to other customers as well too. That's a very good point about KPIs. Case studies. If we're talking about hosting a podcast, webinars, if we're talking about creating and designing PDFs that are shareable with the sales team as well as on the website, if we're talking about video interviews, that's all the case as well too, for being able to create that narrative that helps with awareness and reaching specific users out there. Richard says, any recommendations on putting the growth hack machine together with HubSpot, with Google Analytics, LinkedIn APIs, Facebook APIs? What have you seen work? So I could tell you, when we talk about, we'll go one by one with them. HubSpot is the PayPal of CRM. But with CRM, there's about 1,000 different platforms out there to choose from. I find HubSpot to be dependent on what you're using it for. There are certainly some free functions that might be a little bit watered down and lightweight for you. So I would recommend searching for a CRM that fits for you. If you are in a specific segment, like in our case, finance and FinTech, there are FinTech CRMs out there. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I can go ahead and tweet that later. But like, for instance, there's in legal tech, there's a platform called Lawmatics. Lawmatics is a CRM, obviously for lawyers and legal tech professionals out there, and it's built with custom forms specific for people working in law. Now, if you are in a finance space or fintech space and you're looking for a CRM, there's going to be certain custom capabilities you're probably going to need. And sometimes going with an all-in-one platform like HubSpot, or just going with any CRM for that matter, may not have that capability built in. What I recognize as we kind of reach a point in our society where everything's getting hyper specialized, I'd recommend looking into one that is FinTech first, and maybe take a look at what your competitors are using as well too, or other people in your space as well. Google Analytics, at the end of the day, Google Analytics is fantastic. I highly recommend being able to create event tracking, because event tracking is imperative for being able to run A/B tests, and being able to have those metrics comparable between original data versus variation data. I highly recommend utilizing Google Analytics, tying that in with Google Tag Manager, tying that in with Google Optimize, and then as well setting up your Google Search Console as well, so that you have your full flex of SEO optimizations on home pages and just tracking website visitors. If we may touch one more second on that, Hotjar is absolutely fantastic for being able to get visitor screen recordings. And that's kind of creepy. I didn't realize that it's actually as creepy as it is, but being able to watch users on your website moving their mouse and seeing where they're clicking and typing, with the exception of passwords and critical information and such, but being able to see them use the platform helps me very well to be able to figure out where they're going. Are they scrolling past a certain part of the page very quickly? Let's remove it completely. Maybe it'll improve the call to action. If they're getting stuck in a certain area, maybe we should adjust that as well too. Hotjar is fantastic for being able to not only see screen recordings of visitors, but also the ability to see heat maps as well. So where, from a visualization standpoint, you'll see more of a red area, kind of looks like a weather map or something, but essentially red, yellow to green, what areas people are spending more time with their mouse on, which you can associate to their eyes. And that's a whole nother level of neuromarketing, which if I ever get to do another Ask Reggie show, I should definitely talk about neuromarketing. That's absolutely fun. And just so you all know, it's kind of a niche term, but neuromarketing is the synergy between neuroscience and marketing, the ability to utilize physiological actions in the brain and the body in response to different marketing messages and such. If you want to read about neuromarketing, I highly recommend Roger Dooley. He has a fantastic book from the early 2010s regarding neuromarketing. And if you really, and especially since, like at the time when it came out, it's a bit scary because people are like, oh, I want to make my own decision. But at the end of the day, it's not their own decision. I highly recommend looking at that. If you really want to get analytical, Neuromarketing by Roger Dooley, but also Dataclysm. I don't remember the name of the author, but I know that he's the co-founder of OkCupid, the dating site. But that is a data science book that talks about human behaviors, and being able to analyze data in a way that takes numbers and puts them into figurative narratives. And it is a fantastically interesting book. I highly recommend that as well too. So you also mentioned LinkedIn APIs and Facebook APIs. Yes. So if you want to talk about growth hacking, if you want to, for instance, do contests, if you're doing contests, I highly recommend something like Rafflecopter, at least the alternatives to that. They have APIs that plug into Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. And if you're looking for gamification techniques related to contests, Rafflecopter and the like, there's another one that I used recently. I can't remember the name off the top of the head, but that's also a really good platform too. And we'll take one last question from Cynthia because we're at 1 o'clock now. And BTOC, what do you think about the TikTok hacks content that push you towards a platform that have it all? I'm not familiar with BTOC, but if we're talking about all-in-one platforms, B2C. Oh, sorry. So B2C, the TikTok hack content that pushes you towards a platform that have it all. So I think from what you're gathering, and tell me if I'm wrong, if we're talking about TikTok. First off, I'm not super versed on TikTok. I hear lots about it. I read as much as I can about it. Fantastic platform for outside of all the dancing and stuff like that. Fantastic for learning. I have a colleague that watches it specifically for the learning and education aspect to it. And I do, it's pretty much the extent of what I know about the TikTok, other than being a fantastic platform for B2C and being able to create content specifically for that B2C market, if your market exists for that. In correlation to FinTech, I don't think there's any users that primarily use TikTok for finance or FinTech, but there's a case where, when you say platform that has it all, I don't think there is a platform that'll ever have it all. I think that right now we're at a point in time where we now have users that are choosing their groups and being able to say, you know what, they do Facebook groups and they do Instagram stories, and that's the places they go. You have to know exactly where that is, because that's partially where they all head towards, those solutions to the problems they present in TikTok. So I would say I'm not familiar with platforms that TikTok technically uses in terms of the platforms that have it all. Maybe, you know what, I'm going to spend a little bit more time. If you have Twitter, feel free to add me on Twitter. I can certainly answer that question on Twitter, Cynthia. I'll look a little bit more into that. Off the top of my head, I don't know if I have that answer, but I can certainly get there for you at a later time. Richard says, Reggie, awesome session. Thank you, Richard, and thanks to everyone. I'm going to sign off here. It's 1 o'clock, and there's probably better sessions going on right now. I'm just kidding. But ultimately, really happy to host this. Had a fun time. Feel free to follow me on Twitter, Ramon Live. Feel free to subscribe to my Substack, where I send 2 articles a week on marketing, entrepreneurial marketing specifically. It's at marketer.substack.com. Anyway, thanks again, everyone.